Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode 137. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation. Happy Memorial Day to everyone out there. Dave, I want to start today's show with some nonsense. So if you want to hear some non-banter and just Steelers news, just skip ahead about 2 minutes here. Promise I'll keep this very short. But Dave, I am struggling with maybe the most difficult decision I'm finding that anyone can possibly make. How do you buy a mattress? I have no idea. There are so many options. Every review says, oh, we all hate this mattress. You can lay on one for 5 minutes inside a store. Give me some direction here, man.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you. Most of my life, I was lucky just to have a mattress.
All right. Fair point.
Not that I would go shopping for them, and obviously, once I grew up, those are things that my wife decided on. I think we have that Sleep Number thing right now.
Oh, okay.
It is what we have, and it's really easy to put together and those kind of things. So I don't know. And plus I think it can go on any type box spring or, along those lines there. So, I love it. It's got both sides where each of us can have, set the number of firmness and all like that. So, I don't know. I'll give you a little bump in pay, and maybe you can afford that.
It's not the price, man. It's just trying to figure out what do you like and what's good and what's quality. It feels like a minefield out there. So if anybody has any advice on how to determine what is the right mattress, let me know. Send us an email.
I think the thing about that sleep mattress as well too is the way you can break that thing down. You don't have to worry about actually hauling a full size mattress when you go to move.
That's a good point too.
But I would maybe look into one of those Sleep Number things and see if you like it. And I think they probably got money back guarantees and whatnot. You can probably send it back if you don't like it there. So go. My suggestion would be go that route.
All right, good deal. All right, Dave, we'll speed ahead here with some Steelers news.
I have something at
sure.
the top of the show here. We'll use this as kind of question Monday on this Memorial Day here. Does anybody out there listening, longtime listener, do app designs for iOS and Android? We have been looking to do that for years, get some sort of an app going for the site, and just for whatever reason it always gets pushed off. We're now ready to do that, and I wanted to give listeners an opportunity. I'm sure we got a couple of people out there, Alex, all this time that maybe work in the business or maybe work for somebody that does that kind of thing. So if you are in the app building business or work for someone that builds apps, or want to refer us to somebody who can build us an app for the site, please do so. And the easy way is theterriblepodcast@gmail.com, and send that over to us. So I wanted to get that out at the top of the show here today.
Yeah, no, good call on that. I know we've gotten a lot of feedback and questions in the past about the possibility of an app. We've considered it, and we're trying to really consider it even more and potentially do something before the season begins. But Dave, let's steer into the Steelers conversation. Obviously a very slow weekend, not much happening in terms of hard news or things we have to talk about. Probably going to have a shorter show today. We'll have our live stream tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time as well. 7 p.m. Eastern time as well until 8 p.m. But let's start here with one topic that is a little more recent, kind of Steelers adjacent related. We had written a couple days ago about it appears that Juju Smith-Schuster may be on the outs in New England, signing a multi-year deal for some good money, new head coach, new regime, production's not there, knee concerns. And so one of the beat writers up there in New England believes that he's going to be not long for that Patriots organization, maybe cut here by, who knows, August sometime. Not entirely sure when the timeline might work out to be. But it's naturally led the question, should Pittsburgh have any interest in Juju? Should he be released given their need at receiver, given their, being familiar with him from drafting him and having him in Pittsburgh for several seasons? So what are your thoughts on a potential reunion with Juju?
First and foremost, let me say that I've always been a huge fan of Juju Smith-Schuster, the person. I kind of think some of that stuff got overblown during his time in Pittsburgh. I mean, this is a guy that when he came into the league, the whole social, he good on him for being able to maximize his brand and build a brand, so to speak, at the time when he was coming into the league, and not a lot of players were doing that kind of thing. Obviously had a very, very good rookie season and put together some, a couple of decent seasons there, playing alongside Antonio Brown during his time in Pittsburgh. And then, free agency came and off he went. He was able to win a Super Bowl, obviously, with the Chiefs a couple of years ago. Here's the thing about where he's at right now, though. You got a guy that I think that you have to manage once the season gets started because of his knee. I think that knee's probably always going to be an issue with him. You look at the situation that he is in right now with the Patriots. He's set to earn $7 million in 2024, and that's all fully guaranteed right now as well too. And I think he's got a per game roster bonus built into that. So there's some likely to be earned, I guess, stuff as part of that. If he were to get cut by the Patriots, I think maybe you can entertain him as an addition at a much lower salary. Personally, I would not trade for a $7 million salary for Juju Smith-Schuster. No way would I do that. At this point, I'm not even sure. $3.5 million, but I mean, $3.5 million would probably at least be the ceiling when it comes to him, and a price point on that. I guess you have to look at it in totality, is looking at your wide receiver room as it sits right now, with everybody behind George Pickens, and that includes Calvin Austin III, Van Jefferson, Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller, Callaway, go down the list. Does adding Juju Smith-Schuster to that room hugely move the needle any? And in my opinion, no, it doesn't. So if no, it doesn't is the answer, then you damn sure better be, if you are looking to add a player like that still to your roster, you better be careful what you spend the money on. Because he might not end up making the roster per se there. So I like I like the person. I like the nuances of what Juju can still bring you in the offense. The tough yards after the catch, the physicality in the blocking game, and that all aspect of it. But I don't think he's a needle mover, and certainly not somebody I would entertain going after at $7 million per season.
I agree. And my answer, to keep it short and sweet, is no, regardless of finances, at really any monetary value, even for a minimum or just above minimum type of contract, I would not bring back Juju. And it has nothing to do with the, personality and people not liking his culture fit. That was never a concern for me, or very rarely a concern for me. Maybe once or twice I thought he crossed the line. But that's not the issue here. The issue is just him as a player, a declining player with troublesome knees, who's a underneath slot receiver for a team that needs a big outside, hopefully someone more dynamic post-catch type of X receiver. And so I just don't see the fit there. I see that as, maybe better than Van Jefferson or Scotty Miller, but by how much? Not much, if any. And it's not moving the needle one iota to me. There is some maybe value as a big slot blocker, what they had with Allen Robinson last year, but they can replace that with a healthier Pat Freiermuth this year, and the tight ends who should be more active overall in this Arthur Smith based offense. So to me, flatly, no interest in Juju's return, even if he's flat out released, which he maybe by end of summer and a free agent for very cheap, I still would have no interest in bringing him back.
Even though they could have designated, I don't think the Patriots are hurting at all in salary cap space at this point in time. In fact, I know they're not. And so, that $7 million being guaranteed for him in 2024. The other aspect is he's under contract through 2025, so there would be some dead money. There's 2 years worth of proration at left on his deal at $2.6 million per year. If they were serious, and what I'm getting at here is they could have already parted ways with him and made him a post June 1st designation and carried that full salary all the way until June 1st to let Juju see what else is out there. So I do kind of wonder at this point, even once they get past June 1st, will they part ways with him? Are they still looking and hoping maybe to potentially trade him? I think they're going to have it. I think they're in a tough spot to try to find a trade partner for him at $7 million plus a $1 million roster bonus on top of it there. So I guess that's a long way of saying I'm not even sure they're going to dump him right now. So because they could have done that throughout early in the offseason without issue there. So we'll see what happens to him, but I'm not expecting him to land in Pittsburgh. No.
They did draft a pair of receivers, Jalen Polk in the second round, Javon Baker in the fourth round. So they got a couple of young guys there that, you would assume they'll occupy roster spots. Polk certainly will. Baker highly likely to make the team. I don't know what kind of depth they have beyond that. They got, I think, Douglas there and of course Juju as well. So I'm not entirely sure what his future is in New England in terms of the depth chart and how things are constructed up there. But it appears the beat guys are believing that he's closer to being on his way out than playing his way onto the roster.
Look, what have you said about this aim high here? If you're going to go out from this point forward and go get somebody, go get a needle mover here. If you're going to do this.
Right. So I just wanted to get your thoughts there because it has been talked about in some of the media circles during this slow portion of the offseason with that news up there in New England from the beat guys on Juju. All right, Dave, we'll bring it back to Pittsburgh here, and OTAs will kick off on Tuesday, run Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll have more to discuss, I'm sure, for Wednesday's show. So things pretty quiet right now. I'm going to probably write about this either today or tomorrow morning. I know it's spring, and we're all prone to overreacting and being a little too, knee-jerk reaction here. And it's a long process, and things are going to play out. I'm not even at, OTAs, obviously, so I can't speak specifically to how a guy like Broderick Jones is being used, but we're hearing some of and he's talked about he's flipping, he's playing left tackle, he's playing right tackle. It kind of bothers me that he's doing this flipping thing. Your first round pick last year is working in this, I don't want to call it swing tackle role, but it's been working both spots. And just part of me says, if you're going to move him to left tackle, which I'm good with, just play him at left tackle. Let him fully concentrate on left tackle instead of this back and forth. He's going to be this guy where Moore's your left tackle and Fautanu your right tackle, but Jones has to draw both. I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to be patient, not trying to overreact, but it doesn't sit great with me.
Was it Munchak of the belief of just play people where they need to play at?
Did he say that? You're probably right. I just can't recall a quote specifically from him.
I can't call the quote either, but it seems like several people try to tweet that at me, and it seems like there's something related to that I remember. But you would think you would have an idea, right? Well, look, why didn't there were several reasons why kind of both of us didn't talk a lot about Fautanu ahead of the draft there. We mentioned him. A, I think most people thought he'd be off the board. B, there was the talk about is he going to be a tackle? Is he going to be a guard at the NFL level? And really the other thing was from a Steeler-based perspective was, well, he's a left tackle and the Steelers need a right tackle so Broderick Jones can play left tackle.
Right. That was my perspective, to be honest.
When you look at him and all. So I understand what they're doing or what they're saying, but it does feel like, I mean, are we really going to get here's my biggest gripe. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but my biggest gripe is, man, are we going to get to week 1 and Fautanu is not going to be the starter, and we're going to have to wait to week 5 or week 6 to get that kid in the lineup? Because I mean, how long did it take? Now, here's the thing: Fautanu obviously had more college experience than Broderick Jones and things, along those lines. So I guess it's more fathomable that you wanted to get him a lot more adjusted to things, speed and all like that in the NFL. But even so, in today's day and age, man, you can't mess around with the timetable. You got to get these guys going and in the lineup, these first round draft picks, you know?
Sure.
So I think that, that was one thing and what would have happened if Chikwama Okorafor wouldn't have said whatever he said, right, that got his butt benched last year? How many more weeks would that have taken for Broderick Jones to get on the field? So that's that gripe there. And I just wonder, and look, I'm a fan of going ahead and addressing this line the way that they have, but don't spend another first round draft pick and have this kid wait 5 or 6 weeks to get him on the field, man. Figure it out, whatever side it is, and get working at it and start making plans towards week 1. So I guess that's a combined of your beef and kind of my beef from last year.
Right. I certainly appreciate, and I'm all for this team spending heavy investments in the offensive line. I think it's fantastic. I think it is, big picture, from an identity philosophy standpoint, maybe the best thing they've done the entire offseason.
Look how that helped the Eagles,
Right. And you have Andy Weidel, the assistant GM, coming over, and you see this team being built in a very similar way from the offensive line approach. I guess my complaint is, to try to say it neatly, is why does it always feel so messy with Pittsburgh and drafting offensive linemen? And maybe it feels less messy to the players and to the team than it does to me on the outside. But every time they draft one of these guys, they want to just start moving them around to positions that aren't their natural spot, whether you go back to Kevin Dotson and Kendrick Green and Broderick Jones and now Troy Fautanu, admitting that there's some difficulty there and some challenges in flipping over to right tackle after playing left tackle for so long at Washington. And it just, I'm not saying these guys can't do it and they can't settle in, and the first round picks and the top tier athletes. And if those guys, they can figure it out, it's them. And, we'll see how things go. And I get with Jones, he's probably going to be your backup right tackle, even if he's your day one starting left tackle, because Moore's not going to play over there. And so you want to get him reps there too. It's just, I feel like we always have these conversations that Pittsburgh has to stop doing these flip-flopping and moving guys around and just play them where they're comfortable and where they've been playing. And they do it again, and we just say, okay, we'll see how it goes. And then a year or two later, we sit there and say, yeah, maybe they should just play that guy where he was born to play. And I just feel like they keep stepping into that hole time and time again.
Yeah, you keep, my old man used to say, Davey, he said, you can stand in the garage, it don't make you a car. There are some instances where, look, I mean, with Kevin Dotson, I hate to keep going back to that, but that guy played 50-something games in college at right guard. How many? Did he even take a snap in college at left? I don't think he did.
I don't believe he did.
I think it was predominantly right guard. Exclusively at right guard over 5 seasons, right? Or was it 4 or 5? I can't.
His whole career.
Yeah, his whole career. But I know it was 50-something games that we're talking about there. And then, his first, I think he cut his teeth in the NFL for whatever reason he had to get in line. It was at right guard, I think.
And, because DeCastro got hurt or missed or something. Right,
and it wasn't bad tape right out of shoot with him. I remember that as well, too. And then lo and behold, they try to make, they get him over to the left side. He's not comfortable there for whatever reason. Had the penalty. He never fit at left guard. You trade him away last off season. You get him with a coach that pretty much just lets him be the player that he was at Louisiana and Lafayette. And that's the best thing that ever happened to that guy. I mean, I remember watching tape last year with the Rams and thinking, my God, good for him. Because, I mean, it looked good, I mean, there was a reason he was one of the top ranked PFF right guards in the league last season. And by that happening, the Steelers messed up, so to speak there. So, yeah, I mean, I understand. And there is part of me now with, and I think I had said this right after they drafted Fautanu as well, too. The guy's already comes out of college playing all those snaps at left tackle, and at least now you've got Broderick Jones with a little more than right around a half a season at right tackle. Just go ahead and let that be the way that it's going to happen and move forward with it and get these guys working towards week 1 that way.
That was definitely one approach. And honestly, for a guy like Broderick Jones, it may have been easier for him to play some right tackle because he was just a younger guy that wasn't so ingrained and entrenched in left tackle as Fautanu was, who had triple the starts almost that Jones did. Now, I know Fautanu played some high school right tackle, but even still, it doesn't make you ready for the NFL. It gives you some muscle memory. There is a benefit to that. I've talked and written about that, but it is still going to be a challenge. And he's discussed that as well. So maybe you get into training camp and it's much more settled. In the spring can be time for versatility and flexibility and kind of seeing how things look and how guys respond to different positions. And I know there is some, the season is still months away. And so I don't want to overreact, but I just have this sinking feeling of not loving how a guy like Broderick Jones is being used to start his career.
They seem like sometimes they're so worried about position flexibility they forget about the original position.
for their first round picks. So you got a backup in there. I'm all for that. You got to be versatile. Yeah. Spencer Anderson has to be versatile. He's got to work around. I get that, but it feels like Dan Moore, and I'm a bigger fan of Dan Moore than most people, but he's been this fly in the ointment, this kind of blocking obstacle where everyone's had to work around Dan Moore because he doesn't want to work at right tackle. And I think it's created a lot of issues where Dan Moore is really disrupting ideally how these first round picks get used.
And I don't know how other you need it stated by either the head coach or the player himself that right tackle really is not an option for Dan Moore. I mean, in so many words, Mike Tomlin said that as well too last season, right? And I mean, so you gotta positions. And look, I mean, I'm not for playing a guy at a position that he doesn't feel comfortable playing, right?
Sure.
But it does kind of make you wonder: are we going to get to week 1, and Dan Moore is going to be your starting left tackle, Broderick Jones is going to be your starting right tackle, and what kind of chaos? Because people don't lose jobs just especially if they're winning for whatever reason. You don't just say, fantastic job, you're playing at a Pro Bowl level, we're going to get the next guy in there now to replace you. Sure. Something is going to happen or has to happen to get Fautanu in there. So I worry about what that potentially looks like here. I tell you, kind of going down the same path there. I wrote an article last couple of days or a couple of days ago about Dan Moore, and man, his path sort of similar to at least kind of what the Steelers were dealing with last offseason with Kevin Dotson. Kind of go into the offseason wondering if you're going to have a starting job or not. Really, it was more slanted against Dotson last year because of the money that they went out and spent on Isaac Seumalo there. But you kind of wondered what Kevin Dotson's role is going to be with this team at the same time last year. On top of that, Kevin Dotson, like Dan Moore, this offseason received that bump in pay via the proven performance escalator. It's not a killer cost overall when you look at Dan Moore, but I mean it's significant. When you look at the rest of the depth chart of what I'm getting at here is, man, my hope when it comes to this offensive line here, and several people have written us and wondered, might Dan Moore ultimately be a trade candidate as the offseason progresses. As we sit here right now and have sat here since the draft, on paper, it doesn't seem very likely because of him potentially being at least your best third option, even though he would be specific at left tackle only. But I mean, how far of gap actually do you think there is right now between, say, a guy like Dan Moore and, say, a guy like Dylan Cook or Spencer Anderson?
That probably remains to be seen based on the progression that Cook and Anderson can show, and probably Cook more than Anderson. I don't think Anderson's really going to be much there at left tackle.
Right.
I think Cook could potentially be that guy if he progresses the way he was flashing last year's first stint with the Steelers. But I get the comparison overall, but I would say, and you probably agree, that Moore is the better scheme fit and would be more the immediate backup, whereas Dotson, he was not the starter, and then behind Nate Herbig as well. And so there really was no role, even with an injury, for Kevin Dotson last year.
Yeah, especially going out and get Herbig at the price that they got him for, and having you knew Mason Cole wasn't going to go anywhere at center. And all, it made the path to jettison him a little clearer and cleaner when it came to Dotson than it does. It's a lot messier this year with Moore, but I mean, they still share a lot of similarities, though.
Sure.
Just the same, although not identical there. And on top of it is, technically Dan Moore is a one position player. In order for us to get in the same spot where this team is dealing Dan Moore for what was essentially just swaps of late round picks, right?
Was that the deal with Dotson? Yes, I don't remember the exact details, but go ahead.
It was a couple of late swap of late round picks and all like that was essentially all they got for him.
Okay.
But you never know. You get to the point out there where there's a team that's lost their left tackle that could use some left tackle, use a starting left tackle in a pinch for whatever reason. And I think the most interesting thing to watch, and it's kind of what we talked about specifically with Dylan Cook, I think, because he is the next guy that you would circle kind of on that list based on what we saw him last year, is can Dylan Cook actually push a guy like Dan Moore this summer? Now he would obviously have to do so by playing both left and right tackle, which I think he's shown that he can do, at least in the preseason and all like that. Can he make Dan Moore expendable? And also, within that, Fautanu got to be able to progress and do the things that you want him to be able to do. So there are questions about this offensive line moving forward, how it will be. You have a feeling how it will ultimately end up, at least by the middle of the season. But what will it look like in the meantime?
Sure. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Dave. The two things that would have to occur for Moore to be traded or for that door to really open up is for Fautanu to become someone you're very comfortable with starting, let's assume at right tackle, and then more importantly, for Dylan Cook to feel like he can be the top swingman that offers you additional versatility playing left tackle and right tackle, whereas Moore would likely be just the backup left tackle. If both those things occur, then that door starts to swing open, but it'll have to take those things. Otherwise, I'm very confident Dan Moore will be a Steeler week one, whether that's starter or backup.
Here's the thing, and as I always like to say, especially closer to the time that we get to the start of training camp, these things have a funny way of just working themselves out organically, and unfortunately, that working their ways out sometimes includes an injury or two. And
or a doghouse comment.
Right. Or dog or whatever there. But, yeah, I'm with you with kind of having that kind of feeling, wondering if Dan Moore might be that week one guy. I just wish that, at least by the time mandatory minicamp rolls around, can you kind of leave people where you think they might be?
I'd like to, and maybe they will. I know it's the first week of OTAs, and a lot of guys were shifting, and Tomlin talked about that. And this is the time of year to do that and toy around with things. And you just take a look at how a guy looks at this position. I'd like to see some more Dan Moore at right tackle, see how he looks there. I know he's uncomfortable, but they never even try to play him at right tackle. So, of course, he's going to be uncomfortable even attempting right tackle because he's been a left tackle for nearly his entire football career. But that's just just an uneasy feeling, and it may just be me reading into it too much and without a whole lot else going on in the spring right now that I'm fixated on that more than I otherwise would be. Just want to watch that going forward, I guess is my point here.
And it was a funny throwaway comment, but maybe there's something to it on top of Broderick Jones teasing Russell Wilson about how short. Damn, you're short. Does that mean you need a 15-step drop or something? You've got new quarterbacks in those rooms now. Don't you want guys to get used to certain sides of what it feels like with the quarterbacks in their natural drops and all like that. I mean, it's just a little piece of the puzzle, and you as usual, probably over analyzing this, but don't you want people to get used to people, especially when it's not like you've had Ben Roethlisberger back there for 20 years, and everybody's got to feel with how he does things. I mean, you've got new quarterbacks in that room, and you've got several young players on that offensive line that got to get used to how the quarterback is going to be in certain situations.
Sure. I think it's a really good point. If you're the left tackle in Pittsburgh, you have to understand that Russell Wilson has a tendency to bail to his left, that if something's not there, he will do that spin out and roll to his left, a la Kenny Pickett last year. And there's not a lot you can do about that as a tackle, because once that quarterback bails, it's hard to really, block the edge, but you still want to know. You still want to know that's how my quarterback reacts in certain situations against interior blitzes, or after 2.5 seconds and that clock starts to go off, he wants to start to move and shift and change the pocket. And so that's going to be important. And just even for a new offense in general, it's a new offensive coordinator. And yeah, the O-line coach is the same. It's probably not wholesale changes, but you're just trying to find some comfort, some stability. And Broderick Jones has certainly lacked stability to start, his first year and a half in the NFL.
I mean, I'm glad they've addressed his offensive line for sure,
right.
and hopefully what they have done in these last couple of seasons will prevent them from having to throw a lot of high pick mud at it moving forward,
Right.
But
that's the goal.
But also too, I'm tired. This team needs to get in the playoffs and win a playoff game.
Sure, they do, and their offensive line has to be the anchor. And my point is, we just have the same conversation about these guys moving around and flip-flopping, playing at a position, quote unquote, and the consequences of that. And they do it again. They do it again. And you just hope the results are different. But history says that it's been a challenge for some of these guys.
All right. What else do we have to talk about today?
Just a small point, and it's probably pretty obvious. We know that Russell Wilson is in pole position, the front runner, whatever Mike Tomlin phrase you want to use. But and I was actually, of all people, I was listening. This is from the Bears, one of the, I think, Chicago Sun-Times writers, who was in Pittsburgh last week and observed and talked about how he felt that Pittsburgh had a better plan for Justin Fields and his body language is better. And we can discuss and debate how relevant those comments are. But he had said something about, they in the media situation in the scrum post-practice, you had Russell Wilson on the podium speaking to reporters. You had Fields in his locker room. He spoke to reporters after Wilson was done talking, and the PR team would tell, hey, Justin, guys want to talk to you, but they want to talk to Russell first. Can you hang out in the locker room and wait for the media guys and the reporters to come to you? And it just makes me think that not only just in depth chart and in some of the language, but just in the way that these guys are, I don't want to say carrying themselves, because Fields is certainly pushing and has the mentality to be a starter, but it feels like Russell Wilson is the true starter in the sense of he's the one who had the press conference after he signed. He's the one who organized the spring workout out there in San Diego. He's the one who took the guys to the Pirates games and the Pens games. He's the one who is on the podium post-practice outside speaking to reporters, not speaking at his locker room. So just on that feeling alone, how how your presence is felt and received, it certainly feels like Wilson is your slam dunk starter.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't felt otherwise since really even Fields was added. I mean, I think Mike Tomlin, some of the words that he's tried to use with pole position and opportunity to compete and all like that is just him trying to be a little bit more careful coming out of at the end of last year. He was asked, "Is your starting quarterback on this roster?" Yes. Right? I mean,
yeah, big red X. No, incorrect answer there.
Maybe Tomlin's more resigned to the fact that anything can happen.
True. I guess my point is this 2022 all over, where you had the illusion of competition between Trubisky, Pickett, and Rudolph, but it really was, unless something monumental occurred, injury aside, that Trubisky was going to open up 2022. Is this the same thing with Wilson in 2024?
That's a good point. I mean, it was painted.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of painted as, oh, we're gonna go out there and spend whatever they invested in Trubisky that first year, $8 million, whatever it was. But yet drafting a quarterback and then saying, yeah, but we're going to let these guys compete,
right.
And knowing good and damn well Mitch Trubisky was going to be out there week one, barring something catastrophic that would not physically allow him to get on the field.
Mm-hmm. Is this the same thing happening, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It is, and it'll continually be painted that way as, we're going to let these guys compete. But to me, I think it'd take something very non-predictable for Russell Wilson not to be the week one guy.
Sure. And we know even before my commentary about all that kind of other stuff, that Wilson was the heavy favorite to start. So it's no big stretch of mind to say that, yeah, it's essentially Wilson's job. But just some additional thoughts on that. I do think the conversation, at least from a media standpoint and fan standpoint, could shift, because I think Fields will have a good preseason. I think it'll be exciting. I think it'll be dynamic. I think he'll make a bunch of plays going against second string guys in practice and certainly inside stadiums. He's going to be just the most talented guy on the field whenever he's taking snaps with the twos, whether that's his side or the opposing side. And that may create some buzz just off of that. But I just in the way that Wilson is carrying himself and the way that he's acting, he's certainly acting as if he's the starter. I don't really see that changing unless, again, something just huge happens from now until September.
And what if that something huge was non-injury related and Russell Wilson, for whatever reason, or ended up being asked to be the number 2 to start the season? He's not going to be very happy about that.
No, he's not. I don't know what that would look like in terms of his acceptance of that and where the team and where he goes from there. We know that he's on the minimum, and so Pittsburgh has no financial really tie to Russell Wilson. That'd be one of those cross that bridge when we come to it conversations.
What would it look like for something about, and it would have to be probably on both sides. What would it have to look like between now and week one for Russell Wilson? And what would it have to look like between now and week one for Justin Fields to be the starter? And is that even something that Mike Tomlin would even remotely consider putting himself in a position of? Would he honestly let the best, especially if it's obvious, would he let the obvious play out from what he saw in practice?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I go to. Even though Tomlin has framed this as a competition, it's really hard to see a path where Wilson is not starting week one. What would that have to look like? It would have to be so disastrous for Wilson and so good for Fields, and those things would have to happen concurrently.
And even is that enough,
Right. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I don't know exactly, but certainly I think the team's full intention is for Wilson to start, and something big would have to occur for that to change.
I mean, yeah, I'm with you on the Fields during the preseason, but you could get in preseason and Fields be
lighten up some rookies, journeymen.
Yeah. Fields could come out of the preseason leading the NFL in touchdown passes, have an 80-yard touchdown run.
100%. Like I'm expecting stuff like that.
You could see that kind of stuff playing out, and you just wonder how bad it would have to be in a limited time for. Here's the thing too, man, and I realize this is another reason why I wish you had like 4 or 5 preseason games there. You've got to get Russell Wilson on the field some during the preseason here. You have got to get him, like it or not, running the risk of injury. You've got to get that starting offense out there on the field to knock some rust off and all. And I know they did that a little bit, obviously, last year, and you had the Kenny Pickett perfect preseason, which meant absolutely zero. I'm not looking for the perfect preseason. I'm just looking at getting people out there working with each other.
Sure.
You see where I'm going there?
Sure. No, 100%. They need to. And I don't expect these guys to play limited snaps. The only thing is if they play well, that's great, but this happened last year. And so we'll have to wait and see, but absolutely these guys need reps and I expect them to get reps.
Right. I care less about maybe what it looks like other than just getting them out there working together.
Right. So with you there overall, Dave. And again, I'm certainly not making any revelation by suggesting Wilson is going to start the season. I think most people are there, but even just beyond the obvious of Wilson being the veteran and being the front runner right now, the little things about how they act at practice and how Wilson has acted throughout the entire offseason. Again, Fields has the mentality to push Wilson to compete. I love it. That's great. That's the mentality that you want to have. It's healthy. I'm all for it. But just based on, it feels like Wilson has been here for 5 years, and he's the clear veteran guy, that he's the one who does all the things that starting quarterbacks and franchise quarterbacks of your team do, just in terms of how he's carried himself since day one of signing.
I agree. I think he's done everything you would ask a guy in his position to do with this team. So
right. All right, Dave. Anything else here? I think it's basically all I had to discuss and rant about today. Anything else you want to chip in?
Did you tease your coin flip article?
Yeah, I had written yesterday, I guess it was, about the last time Pittsburgh hosted the NFL draft. They'll host it in 2026, and that has gotten certainly a ton of buzz and attention, and rightfully so. But did you know won't be the first time that Pittsburgh has hosted the NFL draft? They hosted the 1948 NFL draft, which, as you can imagine, was far different than where it was. I think I had mentioned this late on Friday's show there, but had the full article go about how the number 1 pick was picked out of a hat and how Pittsburgh had to do coin flips for one of their selections, and how their first selection, Bobby Lane, was traded away immediately. And so it's another great quarterback that Pittsburgh missed out on, although Lane was traded back to Pittsburgh at the end of his career after his great time in Detroit. Their other first-round pick was signed away by the other competing conference. And so it was just a very different time, obviously, compared to how things will look in 2026.
All right. Good job on that. I found that an entertaining read there. All right. Shall we get to some reader emails real quick?
Yeah, let's get through some reader emails and close out today's show. A reminder, we'll have our live stream tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time.
All right. Richard Jameson, this ended up being a Smith-Schuster email. Should the Steelers pursue Juju Smith-Schuster if he becomes available? I remember him as a selfless, hardworking, and talented receiver with a good head for football. He could be a mature veteran presence in the room. However, I've also seen that at this point in his career, he is a slot receiver, and the Steelers are already overstocked at that position. What do you think? Yeah, I think I think this plays back into our conversation earlier in the show there that great guy, I think would be good in the locker room. Actually, I just wonder about positionally, cost, and everything. Does he really move the needle for you? If you had a couple of injuries happen later on in the summer and got in a bind or whatnot, yeah, that might be a guy that you turn to. But other than it just being a good story and a good good for him to be able to end his career and in Pittsburgh, I think it kind of ends there. I'm kind of like, I'm good right now when it comes to Smith-Schuster.
Same. Just don't see the value, don't see the fit.
LM writes in ideal state. Let's see, this is from 2 days ago. I don't know if we got to this. Ideal state of the wide receivers. Ideal state of the wide receiver room may be to add an ideal number 2, but until we do, I've been trying to think of how it could work, and curious on your thoughts. He says, how many pass completions do we need or aim for to accomplish what we want to accomplish on offense? He says if Pickens has 80 catches, Muth has 60, and the running backs have 100, I guess combined, or thresholds around those, how many more do we need? And what I'm really wondering here is, instead of that wide receiver number 2 having a clear next amount and the wide receiver 3 clear next after that, could the Steelers achieve what they're aiming for with their other 4 wide receivers all around 20 to 40 catches and 2 or 3 more tight ends around 50 total? Not should, but could. He says until we add, we don't have. It's kind of been confusing how LM has this written. I guess he's kind of wanting the perfect way for us to divide up the receptions and all like that between position groups, between Pickens, Muth, and then the running backs, and then could they work with whatever's left there. I get the preface of that. I think the big thing, and go back to what kind of Alex had said on this topic here. What happens, God forbid, should you lose George Pickens for whatever reason, or Pickens have to miss 3 games or 5 games, or for whatever reason? What does that look like? And I think the second big thing on that is based on the wide receiver. Look, I mean, we all expect Freiermuth to have a bigger role in this offense, regardless of what this wide receiver room looks like. I think it's okay to think that the running backs might have 100 combined receptions and all like that. What is going to prevent defenses right now from making sure that they bracket Pickens and say, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm going to say, there ain't no way I'm going to let number 14 kill me.
It's valid. I've spoken about that a little bit, may read about this in the future as well. I think the biggest answer to that question is Pittsburgh's run game. If you can, have heavier sets, 12 personnel, you're going to invite teams to have to put an extra guy in the box, roll that strong safety down. If your run game also in general is effective, then you're going to also compel teams to stop the run first and foremost. And if you're putting 8 in the box and you got single high safety, it's hard to bracket George Pickens. It's hard to roll that single high post safety over. Now on third down still, regardless of how good your run game is, you're facing 3rd and 7. It's going to be, if they're playing too high, which has become more and more common in the NFL, then you're going to see more brackets and double teams on George Pickens. And how do you avoid that? You're going to have to be creative with your stacks and bunches and just how you formationally align him, get him in the slot more, which he was more comfortable playing in the slot last year. Roll him as the X a bit more often too, to kind of force teams to declare, are we going to double team or not, the way that teams used to declare on AB when he was backside 3-by-1. So there are some things you can do. It's a valid concern overall. I guess to the big question that he's asking, basically saying, can you have a successful offense despite some non-traditional receiving numbers, atypical from what we've seen in Pittsburgh in the past, where you have 2 outside guys, and they both catch 60 plus passes, and hopefully one has a huge season, and you kind of work from there? Yeah, you probably could. I'm not going to get into the weeds of exactly what the numbers will look like. That's just, kind of fruitless to do. You could have that success, but I think it's a harder path to have in today's NFL. And to, as Davis, you mentioned, to your point, if Pickens goes down, not even we're talking season ending, but what if he goes down like Deontay did in week 1 last year and misses a month? How do you get through that month of the season? It's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, looking back in 2019 with the Titans, right? Wasn't that which year was that for Arthur Smith?
That was his first year as OC in Tennessee.
All right, and they had a pretty good season, did they not? I mean, they went 9-7, but I mean, at least offensively, they're putting up some decent numbers there. Obviously, had Derrick Henry with 303 carries, 1,500 yards on the ground, 16 TDs. That will solve a lot of woes for an offense right there when you have that kind of production out of your running back. Not only that, I mean, it's not like Derrick Henry chipped in a lot in the passing game. Had 18 catches for 206 yards. In fact, what did their running backs combine to have that year? I think let's see, Derrick Henry had 18 for 206. Man, they didn't use the backs hardly at all, did they?
It was the Derrick Henry show. It was like that old stat about the highest scoring brothers in NHL history, or the Gretzky brothers. Wayne has 99.9%, and Brent or whatever has the other couple of assists there. So that's how that backfield was set up.
But when you look at receiving aspect of them, man, AJ Brown had only 52 catches, but he maximized those into 1,051 yards and 8 TDs. Corey Davis had 43 catches for 601 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, it wasn't even close when you went from leading receiver yardage wise down to number 2. Damn. I mean, you're talking 450 yards difference between Brown and Davis, and third on that team that season in receiving was Humphreys with 37 for 3. So you took another almost 300 yard dip down. That ideally would be, I guess, how you map it out for what it would look like for the Steelers. But what was the core that we just said there? Derrick Henry, 303 carries for 1,500. Now, do I think Najee Harris is going to have 300 carries for 1,500 yards? No. But can you combine what him and Jalen Samuels can do? Or Jalen Samuels. I just went back in time there. Jalen Warren can do there and piece this together and to get that. That's the hope, right?
Exactly. Now, I agree. And then to be fair, in 2020, that split was tighter. In 2020, AJ Brown had 70 receptions for 1,075 yards. Corey Davis, 65 catches, 984 yards, 5 touchdowns. Johnny Smith had 8 touchdowns. So you saw more distribution there, but also Davis was a first-round pick, and they had him there already to begin with, Corey Davis. And so Pittsburgh does not have, that two kind of, from a pedigree standpoint, 2 top-tier guys in Brown and Davis. They're searching for that potentially, but right now it's looking like more of Atlanta last year with Drake London. What was the numbers in Atlanta last year in terms of the top receiver, which was London, versus the next guy? I mean, the splits were probably even crazier than what they were in 2019.
Well, B.J. Robinson was your second highest receiver last year for them as far as total receptions went. It went London 69 at 905, Robinson 58 for 487, Pitts, who people still thought was criminally underused, 53 for 667 yards there. And then another tight end, Juju Smith, 50 for 582. So technically your second, as far as a quote unquote wide receiver goes, would have been Matt. Was it Hollins? It had to be Matt Hollins.
It was Matt Hollins, yep.
At 18 receptions for 251, Yeah. And yeah, they tried to lean heavily on Robinson, Bijan Robinson, 214 carries for him, 976 yards. I mean, we're talking about a team that still went 7-10 last year.
Sure, that's how it could look in Pittsburgh broad base, but again, you have to have better quarterback play, and your run game has to be more efficient. Atlanta ran the ball a ton, but they were middle of the pack in yards per carry. I don't know what their run success rate was. Let me look at Robinson's number and run success rate. Do we have that? 43.5%. Doesn't seem to be too strong overall.
Not great, Bob.
Yeah, so obviously, to have this work, if your distribution in the pass game is similar to Atlanta last year, your quarterback play must be stronger, and your run game must be stronger. Those are the 2 things Pittsburgh is banking on.
Even if you go 3 and if you're the Steelers and you go 3-1 in the first 4 games, Alex, but what if George Pickens comes out of that with only 15 receptions in the first 4 games?
Well, you're winning in spite of that, so it means your run game has to be working really well, and I see your defense playing well as well.
What's he going? How's his reaction going to be though?
I mean, we'll see. I mean, we had the Baltimore game last year. He basically didn't get the ball at all, but he was being a great teammate and doing all the little things. So hopefully he's matured some. Again, winning is the cure all to everything. All the stuff about, George Pickens being mad last year came in the middle of losing streaks primarily. So I'd love to see what that. I mean, I don't love to, but I'll take a 3-1 start and Pickens a little unhappy.
What are you looking at right now when it comes to Pickens versus his last year's numbers? 63 catches, 1,140 yards, 5 touchdowns. Do you think he's going to exceed any of those numbers?
I think receptions he will, because the target share is going to be so focused on him. You're not going to get, how many targets did Deontay have last year, even despite missing a month of the season? He had, how many targets last year? 87. Yeah, Roman Wilson's not going to be targeted 87 times this year. So I think he'll beat receptions. I think, yards per catch probably comes down a little bit as his route tree expands even more and some of the underneath game continues to be worked on.
The touchdowns can go up, from 5, you would think. You'd hope.
You'd hope. Yeah, I think there'll be a pretty good distribution overall. So I think it'll be in that ballpark, that 4 to 6 range on touchdowns. The yards, I think more receptions, maybe yards per carry comes down. Call it similar. So I think we'll have more receptions, similar yards, and similar touchdowns.
Do you have that? Not that it's holds a lot of relevance, but what did Mike Clay of ESPN have as a projection for Pickens? Do you remember?
It was on the conservative side. It was lower. His projections are typically lower, just the way that he makes things. I can try to pull it up here in 1 second. But I don't believe he was topping his yardage from last year, at least.
I wonder if he had him topping his receptions, which was 63 last year.
Oh, I'm trying to think here. Give me 2 more minutes, and I know how to find the article. It was a couple weeks ago. I know Wilson's numbers were low, 15 touchdowns. I think he was projecting him for the touchdown numbers were not great overall. Let me just pull it up on Pickens. He was projecting 68 receptions, 1,040 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So 5 more receptions, fewer yards, and fewer touchdowns. 1 less touchdown.
Okay. All right. It does feel like Pickens might be headed for a similar type season.
Yeah, there's the benefit of being the clear number 1. There is going to be the additional attention that comes along with it. Better quarterback play will help as well. So on paper, there are things that indicate it could be a better year for George Pickens. But just given how this passing game may kind of spread the ball around, it may mute that a little bit.
All right. That's about all the kind of most recent questions in the email machine. I think we're about an hour here, and it's Memorial Day weekend, and people probably doing other things. We wanted not a lot to talk about since the Friday show anyway, so we're going to keep this kind of an hour version today. Alex and I'll be back on Wednesday here breaking down what we have seen or heard transpire in the second week of OTAs, which get on our way on Tuesday in Pittsburgh. Got Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this coming week for OTAs, and then the following week I think is one of those 4-day things, right, where they have the team building, team development day in there or something like that, where they got, I don't know, Dave and Buster's or go-karting or something like that. But we'll be back on Wednesday passing along anything new, and maybe we'll find something definitely interesting to talk about, I'm sure, by then. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigation bar. Also, if you'd like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. So until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.